It started as an ordinary Saturday night adventure with my friends. We'd been exploring abandoned places around the city for months, searching for something to break up the monotony of our lives. That night, we set our sights on an old, crumbling hospital on the outskirts of town. A place rumored to have been closed for decades. No one knew much about it. The official records were vague, almost as if it hadn't existed at all. The hospital was covered in ivy and graffiti, with shattered windows and rusted doors barely hanging on by their hinges. Stepping inside was like entering a different world, musty, dark, and filled with the echo of our footsteps. We passed through rooms that still had old, dust-covered beds and half-broken wheelchairs, all bathed in the cold glow of our flashlights. The air was thick, damp, and almost watchful. As we moved deeper into the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. My friends joked around, calling out each other's names and pretending to hear footsteps, but I couldn't join in. Every corner we turned felt like it hid something just out of sight, something that would step out the second our backs were turned. I tried to brush it off, convinced that I was just letting the dark get to me. We found a hallway, its walls lined with strange symbols painted in a dark, faded red. They didn't look like the usual graffiti, more like symbols from some ritual, carefully drawn and perfectly spaced. My friend Sarah leaned in closer, squinting at one of the symbols, when suddenly our flashlights flickered and the room plunged into darkness. For a brief second, I thought it was a power surge or something with the batteries. But then, in the pitch black, we heard it. A shuffling sound just a few feet away. It was subtle at first, like the drag of something heavy against the floor, slowly inching toward us. The lights came back on, and we all froze. There, at the end of the hall, was a figure, a shadowy outline that didn't quite make sense. It was tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long, almost spider-like. Its head was tilted unnaturally to the side, and I could swear I saw it twitch, just slightly, as if it was deciding whether to approach us. Sarah whispered, "Run," but we couldn't move. The figure began to sway, slowly shifting from one side to the other, as if it was testing our reactions. Then, in one swift, jerking motion, it took a step forward. That was enough. We bolted, scrambling back down the hallway through a maze of rooms that all looked the same in our panic. Doors we'd entered easily before seemed to slam shut as we passed, forcing us deeper and deeper into the hospital, as if it was steering us somewhere we didn't want to go. We ended up in a large, empty room. An old surgical theater, with rows of seats circling a rusted metal table in the center. Our flashlights barely reached the edges, casting strange, flickering shadows. We all huddled close, gasping for air, trying to gather ourselves. Then, one by one, the shadows started to move, not like they were shifting with our lights, but like they were crawling, stretching themselves out, creeping toward us. It wasn't just one shadow. It was dozens, and they seemed to spill out of the walls, filling every corner until there was nowhere left to look that wasn't covered by their dark, writhing shapes. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give out. We stood there, transfixed, as the shadows closed in, almost as if they were waiting for us to make a move. I don't know who broke the silence. Maybe it was me, maybe it was someone else. But suddenly we were all screaming, stumbling over each other as we scrambled to find the door. We burst out into the hallway, running as fast as we could. The shuffling sound returned, only now it was louder, closer. We didn't dare look back. By some miracle, we made it to the exit, crashing out of the building and into the cool night air. We kept running until we reached our cars, only stopping once we were safely locked inside. As we sat there, catching our breath, I turned back to look at the hospital, expecting to see that shadowy figure in one of the windows. But the building just stood there, silent and empty, as if mocking us. We never spoke about it after that night. Whenever one of us tried to bring it up, someone else would cut them off. But I can still feel it. The heaviness, the watching presence. And sometimes when I'm alone at night, I hear that slow, dragging shuffle just outside my door. I've always loved exploring abandoned places. When I heard about Starlight Amusement Park, a forgotten park on the city's edge, I knew I had to see it. Locals claimed it was haunted by the spirits of those who never left. I thought it was just a legend, until I went myself. It was nearly dusk when I arrived. The park was a skeleton of what it once was: rusted rides, crumbling ticket booths, and a Ferris wheel that creaked in the wind. Though it stood deathly still. I moved past old food stalls and ticket stubs that littered the ground, making my way toward the funhouse, drawn by its ominous clown face grinning down at the entrance. Inside, the air was stale, and cracked mirrors lined the walls, each one reflecting a distorted version of me. As I walked deeper into the funhouse, I started to hear faint music, a warped tune that echoed through the hallways. It grew louder with each step, almost like a heartbeat. I turned a corner and froze. In the dim light, an old mannequin stood in front of a mirror, arms stretched out as if beckoning me closer. A shiver ran down my spine and I quickly backed away, but the path I'd entered from had disappeared. I couldn't make sense of it, the layout had somehow shifted. Panicked, I tried to find my way out, but every turn led to another distorted mirror, each reflection growing more twisted and unnatural. I stopped in front of one mirror, my heart pounding, when my reflection blinked. I stumbled back, but the reflection remained, its eyes locked onto mine with a sinister grin. I ran, pushing through the maze until I finally found an exit door. I burst out only to stop short. The park was lit up now, every ride glowing with a strange golden light. The Ferris wheel turned slowly, and faint laughter echoed through the air. People were walking around, but something was wrong. They wore old-fashioned clothes, their faces expressionless, eyes staring straight ahead, ignoring me entirely. Then I noticed her, a little girl in a torn dress, standing by the carousel, staring right at me. Her face was blank, but her eyes seemed to recognize me. She raised a hand, pointing in my direction. "You don't belong here." The lights flickered, and in an instant, everything went dark. I was alone again, the silence swallowing me whole. I turned, heart racing, desperate to escape. When I finally reached the gate, I threw myself over, landing hard on the other side. Catching my breath, I looked back one last time at the Ferris wheel. I could swear, in one of the carriages, the little girl was still there, watching me. I left Starlight Park that night, and I haven't gone back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that faint, scratchy music echoing in the back of my mind, a reminder of the park that never truly let me go. It started as a dare. My friends and I had heard about the old, abandoned Line 13 subway station, a stop built in the 1950s, but abandoned after a series of unexplained accidents. Rumors claimed that those who entered never returned, but I never believed in urban legends. So, when my friends challenged me to explore it, I took them up on it. I slipped through the fenced-off entrance late at night, armed with only my flashlight. The air inside was thick, stale, and every sound echoed endlessly. As I descended the stairs, my footsteps seemed to get swallowed up by an unnatural silence. The graffiti-covered walls grew darker and colder the further I went. My flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows that seemed to move just out of view. I finally reached the platform. The tracks stretched into darkness on either side, and a single, ancient subway car sat on the tracks, abandoned and still. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, maybe a few rats or some graffiti, but I certainly wasn't expecting the train car to feel so alive. The windows were dark, but it felt like something was watching me from inside. I walked along the platform, keeping my eyes on the train. That's when I heard it, a faint, metallic clanking echoing from somewhere inside the car. My flashlight flickered again, and for a second, I saw something or someone in one of the windows. It was just a shape, shadowy, with eyes that gleamed in the dark. The figure vanished before I could get a closer look, but a cold dread settled over me. I should have left then, but curiosity got the best of me. I stepped onto the train car, feeling the ground sway slightly beneath me. The inside was dim, with seats covered in grime and old, yellowed newspapers scattered across the floor. A distant, rhythmic tapping sound echoed through the car, though I couldn't see its source. As I moved further inside, the doors suddenly hissed shut behind me. My heart jumped, and I turned to push them open, but they wouldn't budge. Then the train lurched, as if it were about to start moving. Panic surged through me. I banged on the doors, calling out, but there was only silence. The lights overhead flickered to life, casting a sickly, yellow glow across the car. I turned, and there they were, passengers filling every seat. Their heads were lowered, faces shadowed, clothes outdated by decades. None of them moved, yet I could feel their eyes on me, waiting. Then, one by one, they began to raise their heads. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow and staring, fixed on me with expressions twisted into strange, unnatural smiles. I stumbled back, the doors finally hissing open behind me. I bolted out, not daring to look back as I sprinted up the stairs and out of the station. As I reached the street, I glanced back into the darkness. The platform was empty, the subway car gone as if it had never been there at all. But ever since that night, I can still hear the faint, rhythmic tapping in quiet moments, a reminder that some places aren't meant to be disturbed.